Welcome. We got a few folks who have a seat. Come on in. Good to see y'all. Welcome, everyone, and good evening from the Maverick Innovation Gateway powered by NEDEC here at Minnesota State University, Mankato. We're setting a new milestone tonight by hosting our first streaming webinar as a part of our Launch Minnesota project. I'd like to give special thanks to University President Inch and Dean Bach, our College of Business Dean, along with Gateway Coordinator Ashley Niss for making this event possible. So for the next hour or so, we are pleased to be joined by Derrick Girard, an experienced entrepreneur, businessman, an Air Force vet, an author of a marvelous book called Put to the Test, and also a Maverick alum. Resilience in entrepreneurship is a common topic and yet often misunderstood. Over the next 50 minutes or so, Derrick is going to help us reach a better and more effective grasp of just what it is. What it takes when you're knocked down and what it takes to get back up and keep coming back when you're, as the title of his book says, put to the test. With no further ado, welcome, Derrick, the Gateway.
Thank you. All right. Make sure this works. All right. So thank you for coming. For everyone who's watching, thank you for watching. Everyone who see this online, I appreciate it, and I don't take any time somebody's willing to spend time out of their day watching me speak for granted. I'm going to talk a lot tonight about my experience, what I've been through. I'm going to share with you some of my opinions. Please understand some of what I'm going to share with you is that it's my opinion. It's what I've seen. It's what I've experienced both in doing it as well as what I do now in consulting. My hope is that it generates questions. My hope is that you have questions. What I don't want to do is stand here and lecture you, because my guess is you've gotten enough of that over the last few years. I don't need to do that again. So I want you to ask questions. If you feel like it's appropriate to stop and ask a question as I'm going through something, please do. But I will leave time at the end to do that as well. So the title is Resilience in Entrepreneurship. One thing that's important is, as I stand here today, I am an entrepreneur. And the interesting thing is, that's probably the first time I've ever actually said that. In my experience, most entrepreneurs don't refer to themselves as an entrepreneur because most entrepreneurs are just problem solvers. And entrepreneurship is taught all over the country, at universities all over the place. And a lot of entrepreneurs, again, they just refer to themselves as problem solvers. They see a problem, they find the solution, and then as a result, they become an entrepreneur. And most of them follow a real need, okay? And I'm going to talk about what that means and how I view that. But before I do, let's talk about some statistics. Before I came here, I did a Google search. And I did two different searches. I said success rate of startups and success rates of small businesses. Slight nuance, but I wanted to see what would come back when I did that. And if you haven't done a Google search in a while, one of the things that Google does now, which is kind of interesting, is they put a lot of AI at the very top. So it's not just links which you have to click on it and see what might pop up. They give you this analysis. And this is the data that came up in that. So 70 to 90% of startups fail. Again, that's sort of the difference between when you type in startup or small business. It kind of gives you a range, but 70 to 90%. You'll see 10% in year one, 50% by year 5. And I put down 75% in the fintech space because that was the space I was in. So I built my technology in the financial services or financial technology. Now, when you look at this, this can do one of two different things. This can either scare you to death and make you avoid it. My hope is that's not the case. For me, this data is almost like a dare, right? It's almost a challenge. So for somebody who's wired like me, I look at this data and I go, watch me. Now, in my opinion, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. I'm going to talk about that. But before I do, let's talk about why startups fail. Again, a different Google search, a different set of information that was given back to me. And here's what it says: lack of financing or investors. Running out of cash. Now, you might think those are the same thing. They're not. Generally speaking, in the business world, those are the kind of the two ends of the business. For a lot of people, lack of financing and investors is kind of a front end problem. I got this great idea, but I can't launch it. Again, it can be somewhere in the middle and at the end, but a lot of times it's the beginning. And running out of cash is essentially, I spent everything I have. Now I'm stuck. Okay. People problems, we're going to talk about that, but it is a very real problem for small businesses and startups. Poor timing. And the last one, the last bullet up there really caught me by surprise. I mean, I kind of knew it, but it was interesting to see this Google analysis, this AI response that says in bold letters, the number one reason is a lack of market need. So I'm going to tell you about my journey, because we're going to talk about the right and the wrong way to do this. So when I graduated from here, I graduated with a financial planning minor. That's what it was at the time, and a business degree. And I went directly into the financial services industry. Now, what was interesting was my career in the financial services industry did all kinds of things. I went all over the place. I did a lot of things to consulting and leadership and having my own practice, which was a ton of fun. And in 2016, I found myself in a pretty interesting situation. So what happened to me was my clients chose to communicate with me through text message. I know as we sit here today in 2025, you're sitting there thinking, well, of course, that's how everyone communicates. But back then it wasn't. Back then you were not allowed to communicate through text in the financial services industry. So when I had that problem, I went to my compliance officer and I said to her, look, there's got to be a solution for this. My clients are texting me, what am I supposed to do? And she said, there is no solution to this. You cannot communicate through text. It's against the rules, all kinds of rules. You will get in trouble. You cannot do it. I wasn't satisfied. So I went to the head of compliance at the organization because I wanted to make sure. So I went to him and I said the same thing. What am I supposed to do if my clients are texting me? And he said, there is no solution. This isn't a unique problem to you. This is happening to everybody, but there is no solution that allows you to communicate through text. And of course, I asked what I thought was the most logical question. Is it because a solution doesn't exist? Or is it because you guys haven't approved it for me to use? Because they have to say I can use it in order for me to use it. I just wanted to know what the reason was. And his answer was, we've looked at everything that we can find and nothing meets the requirements. Got it. So I did what I was supposed to do. I went back to my clients and I told my clients, I cannot communicate through text. Please do not text me. It's against the rules. I will get in trouble. Okay. And what I learned was that my clients cared more about convenience than they did about the regulations that I was subjected to. And they continued to communicate through text. So the first solution in my mind for this problem was to avoid it. The most logical thing in the world, right? To avoid this thing. That became clear that wasn't an answer. I couldn't do that. So now I set out on this mission myself. Let me go see if I can find a solution. So I began sitting on demos. I began calling different companies and doing my own searching, and come to realize there's nothing out there. There is no solution to this problem. So knowing that I face this issue, knowing that my peers face this issue, and knowing that they're going to keep texting me and eventually I'm going to get in some serious trouble, I set out to solve the problem. I went to my uncle, who's a computer programmer, and I said, this is the problem. This is what I want to create. Can you do this for me? And he said, yeah, I can do that. And so him and I started working together. And within a few months, this was the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, I went to a conference. At the conference, there was a compliance woman up on stage, thousands of people in the audience, and she is getting absolutely hammered on this idea of texting. Everybody in the audience was having the same issue. They were so upset. Again, at this point in 2017, how can we not communicate through text? And the answer by her was, you cannot do it. I'm sorry, you just can't do it. So I approached her at a break and I said, hey, I saw the presentation. I saw that you were getting beat up pretty good. I want you to know I'm working on the solution to the problem. I said, I'd love to show you where we are so far. And she said, Derrick, I'm so excited I could hug you. I'd love to see it. And so her and I had some interactions that time. I showed her where we were. I went back home and I shared with my uncle there's a real possibility for this. There's a real market for this. This is a real thing. And we created the business within 2 days from there. So the right way to do it, in my opinion, you identify the problem. You identify a real problem. Okay? You confirm that others have the problem. In this case, I knew my peers had the problem, both because I know they do and because I saw it firsthand. Next, you find the solution or create the solution. And then next, you create the business. 1, 2, 3. Problem, solution, business. Make sense? Now let's talk about the opposite of that. I recently had the privilege of meeting some college students who are entrenched in their entrepreneurship classes at their university. I think it's even a major at this particular university, entrepreneurship. So these guys are being so inundated with this idea of entrepreneurship, being a business owner. These students come together and they decided, we're going to be entrepreneurs. We're going to start a business. Now let's go out and figure out what that business is going to be. And they come together and they decide, we're going to build a window washing business. That's fine. I know people that have done that even in college and done well for themselves. So they decide they're going to start a business. They decide window washing is going to be it. I meet them. They said, Derrick, can you help us figure out how to get people to hire us to wash their windows? And I thought, that's okay. It's an interesting question. It led me to questions like, hey, are you going to be residential or commercial? They hadn't thought about that. So of course the answer was, sure, let's do both. Okay, where? Well, we don't know. Anywhere. You'll travel anywhere? Yeah. How are you going to get people to know who you are? Are you going to door knock? Yeah, we think we might hire some other college kids to door knock. Have you guys looked into the permitting in the cities? No. Does that matter? Kinda, right? So I'm asking these questions, they don't have the answers. Okay, think about the order they did it. They did business, solution, and now they're looking for the problem. Right? You see this all the time as I put up there with restaurants. Restaurants do this all the time. If you've seen, especially in small town Minnesota or small town Midwest, you'll see a restaurant pop up in a small town. Sometimes they even build the restaurant from scratch and they're gone like a year later. Then you see another restaurant go in there and they're gone. You see another restaurant go in there and then they're gone. You see it all the time. And a lot of times it's because somebody had the idea that I'm going to be a restaurateur. I've been in the restaurant business for 10 years, 20 years. I can do this. I'm going to start a restaurant. So they do. They find the location, they build the restaurant, and then they hope the community can support it. And this happens all the time. I've seen some buildings with 7 or 8 different restaurants in it over a span of 10 years. Is it because the food's that bad in all of them? No. Gordon Ramsay says, if you guys know Chef Gordon Ramsay, he says the way you can tell if a restaurant's going to make it is how busy are they on Monday. He said they're all busy on Friday and Saturday. That's easy. But the way to have a sustainable restaurant is how busy are you on the other days? And a lot of times these restaurants don't understand the market they're in. Can it support another restaurant? Can you break even? Can you make any money doing it? A lot of times the answer is no, and that's the reason they fail. Again, business, solution, problem. The last one I want to give you is recent. I just gave a presentation at a university, not in Minnesota, to a bunch of grad students. And this is a great, well-respected university, and so much so that this graduate level program partners with major companies from all over the country. And they come to this university, to this business graduate school, and they essentially bring to them projects or things that they're looking for help with, right? Try to get the students some experience. And before I went on and had my discussion with them, I got sent a list of all the different companies that had partnered with the grad school and what they were looking for from the students. Okay, and there's some great programs and some great requests and asks within this, but one jumped out to me. I couldn't even read any other ones when I read this one. It just blew me away. This company, large company, came to the graduate school and these students and said, we are looking for you to do research and analysis to determine if there's a market for a product we just launched. Think about that. This company spent the time to develop it, to make it, to launch it, and now they're asking if there's even a market for it. So think back when I went to that slide about why businesses fail, right? And it's lack of market need. Again, think to the example of what we just talked about. Business, solution, problem. So a lot of times they start with, I want to own a business. When I went to college, I wanted to own a business, right? I did. I wanted to be a business owner. So I came in and majored in business management. I had no idea what that meant at the time, but I liked the idea of being my own boss. Okay, a lot of people do. I respect that, right? But you got to be careful about picking a random service or product. And that's what these window washers did, for example, right? They were so focused on, I want to be a business owner, I want to be an entrepreneur. Let's go find something that works. That's the ready, fire, aim approach of building a business. And then once you do that, you hope like heck there's a business need for what you've built. That's what these college students are doing right now, is hoping there's enough of a need wherever they are to support their new business. Does that make sense? 3, 2, 1 or 1, 2, 3. Don't do it backwards. Start as a problem solver. Find the problem, create or find the solution. As a result, build the business. The path to success is a lot easier when you do it that way versus the alternative. Hope that makes sense. Now, of course, logically, if you build it, they will come. Maybe. I say maybe because we also have to talk about consumers. The way we behave these days is very interesting. Can anybody in this room tell me the significance of November 29th, 2025? We celebrated the same thing. I think it was November 30th of 2024. If you can guess this, I don't even know what I could give you that would be commensurate with somebody knowing this. This is Small Business Saturday. Small Business Saturday was a holiday created by American Express to encourage people to support small businesses around the holidays. And of course, American Express also wanted you to use your American Express card when you do it, right? It's sort of like if you ever heard the saying, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Do you know who created that phrase? Kellogg's, because they were trying to get you to buy cereal. I grew up thinking it was like the doctor telling me that. No, it was marketing, right? So American Express creates Small Business Saturday. Once a year, we are reminded to support small businesses. What about the other 364 days? The harsh reality that I faced when I built my company, honestly, is that we have a system here that is really set up and designed to make being a small business owner and entrepreneur really difficult. Really, really difficult. Really challenging. The way consumers buy, the way consumers behave, think about the way you shop. I'll give you an example, a personal example that applies directly to where we are right now. When I went to college here, Amazon was still a bookstore. That's all it was. This was a bookstore. And to come here and buy my books for school, you guys probably don't know this, but they were like $400 or $500 a book sometimes. They were really expensive. And at the end of the semester, you bring it in to get something back for it and you got a fraction of it. So I remember learning, somebody telling me what Amazon was, and I figured out that I could sell my book for more there and I could buy the books cheaper there. Now, I'm not saying that is the exact reason why we're not sitting in a bookstore right now, but that kind of behavior is how consumers do things today. You walk into a store, you might see something, then you might think, can I get that cheaper online? And that's what you do. That's how consumers behave. You have to be aware of that. People are price checking, they're looking for convenience. If I could order something and have it delivered to me, why wouldn't I? Right? That's how people behave. You have to understand that when it comes to being a small business owner, because you're going to fight that. I did every single day. So let's talk about winning the employee. Sorry, I'm going to start with winning the customer. I went too far. Oh, that is where I wanted to be. Sorry, winning the employee. So winning the customer, that's the challenge there. Now winning the employee. The biggest challenge you have and the biggest risk and the biggest headache I always had was trying to find the right people to bring into my organization. We talked before we got started about how important LinkedIn was. I only use LinkedIn. I sourced everybody on LinkedIn. I didn't do job postings. I didn't do generic job boards. I didn't do that. I wanted to be in control of who I found. The challenge as an entrepreneur, the challenge as a startup is how do you attract the right people? How do you find them? How do you convince them to take a shot on a small business or a startup? Right? That's not an easy conversation to have. How do you build a compensation package that's attractive to them? Right? My wife worked in the corporate world for most of her career. In the corporate world, you get benefits, right? You get compensation packages, you might get stock, right? You get PTO, you get all these different things. In a small business, I couldn't offer any of those things to my employees. That was a challenge for me when it came to recruiting the right people, which also makes retention a challenge. Doesn't mean you can't retain people, but it makes it a challenge you have to be aware of and a challenge you have to head off. So a lot of times you fall into this trap of you don't do an annual review or you try to avoid something before you realize it. Somebody's letting you know they're leaving. Not because they don't want to be there, not because they don't like what you're doing or they don't love the culture, but at the end of the day, that's important. And then theft. It's the thing nobody wants to talk about. It's the thing we all want to pretend isn't real, but it's very real. When I was in college, we were talking about working at Southdale. I worked at a clothing store at Southdale briefly. And like my first day, I remember them telling me the number one issue we have is theft from employees at a clothing retail store. I never even knew that was a thing. I wouldn't have imagined stealing clothes from the store I was working at. And you see up there, 75% of employees admit to stealing from the workplace. Small business, that's a challenge. That's a really big challenge for you. Sometimes it's just stealing time, right? Sometimes if you're small, you have to rely on everybody to do so many different things. If somebody's checked out, not doing what they're supposed to do, there's a ripple effect to that. Okay? $50 billion in annual cost to this alone. And 30% of businesses will go under as a result. It's the harsh truth. You have to know it. Okay? So why resilience matters? When I started my tech company, very shortly after starting, I started approaching not only the small organizations, but I went after the big dogs. I went to the biggest financial services firms in the country to present my solution. Why? Because I knew they needed it. I validated the market existed, right? I already did that homework. I called every one of them. I showed every one of them what we had. And every one of them in their own way, some politely, some not, told me no. Every single one of them said no. This is when resiliency comes in. I always called it professional persistence, right? There's a fine line between being a pest and being persistent, and I never wanted to cross it. I don't think I did. Maybe I did, but they never told me I did. But that's when resiliency matters. For me, we succeeded. As I look back on it, we succeeded because we were small, not in spite of it. The beauty of being small, and what I found out and what I absolutely loved about building this business, was we were nimble. We didn't take weeks or months. We didn't have 25 different meetings to make a decision. We had one meeting. We made decisions in hours. We implemented changes in days. That was massively different for us compared to our competition. That's how we won the business. It helped as we overcame all the rejection, all of the no's, every bit of that. And the crazy thing was, every single company that told us no, every one of them told us yes. Not one or two, every single one of them. And that's the reason. So the thing that I learned, somebody said this to me early on, was you have to define your value proposition. So I built a tool that allowed for texting. That was the foundation of this particular tool. Okay. Somebody said to me, what is your value proposition? What do you do better than anybody else? And the easy thing would have been for me to focus my time on texting. Like, here's how we do this, or here's how we do that. The reality was, the more I thought about this, it had absolutely nothing to do with texting. Nothing. And this is a really interesting thing that I do to businesses now in the consulting space is tell me what you do better than anybody else. What is your competitive advantage? What is your value proposition? And you see people in business that have been in business for a while and they don't know that answer. It's amazing how many people don't know that answer. And it's difficult sometimes. For me, what we did better than anybody else had nothing to do with texting. Our competition would allow you to create an account and pick a number, and they would let you know when they're both ready within a week or two. Ours, you could create an account with the click of a button and it was done. You could pick a number with another click of a button and it was done. You could be communicating with your clients compliantly through text message in seconds, not days or weeks. Speed was our competitive advantage. How fast you could use the tool we built was what we did better than everybody else. Okay? Your personalization, quality, all of that stuff matters. Accountability, all of that stuff makes a difference. When somebody said something to me, customers knew if they shared feedback, it got directly to me. Half the time they were giving it directly to me, they saw the change implemented immediately. That makes a massive difference. That's a major competitive advantage of being small, being nimble, being an entrepreneur. Okay? Own it. Don't be afraid of it. Own it. Very, very important. Now, this is another part of that, being honest. This is one of the hardest things for most entrepreneurs to be, most small business owners to be honest. One of the things that's funny to me, I say this all the time. If you've heard me speak, you've probably heard me say this. What's the problem with people that aren't self-aware? They don't know it. And one of the things that I learned the hard way was self-confidence is a terrible substitution for self-awareness. Self-confidence will convince you that you can do things that you can't do. Self-confidence will convince you that you can do it by yourself. Self-confidence will convince you that you don't have to ask for help. Self-awareness reminds you that maybe you do. Self-confidence is a terrible substitution for self-awareness. And the crazy thing for me was reality had to slap me across the face to remind me of that. And it will, I promise you, at some point. It's not a terrible thing, but it's a humbling thing, right? When it happens, because it will. So you have to be honest. It's a major component to building a successful business is be honest. Ask for help when you need it. Okay? They often admit, entrepreneurs often admit being honest. They often admit this because it's humbling, right? Ego is the enemy in this case. Don't fall victim to that. So now let's talk about how you can move forward in the landscape we're in today. AI. My guess is you guys are probably more familiar with it than a lot of people, being young and still in school. You don't have to be an expert to be good at AI. I'm not. I promise you, I'm not. But I began to really embrace the power of AI. Okay? The crazy thing about this is it gives you a competitive leg up on some of these other people in the same space that you're in because of what it can do for you. Let me give you a couple of examples. I use ChatGPT. This isn't an endorsement for one tool or another. In fact, I couldn't even tell you 3 different AI platforms that exist. I just know that one, and that's the one I use, okay? When I had my tech company, we had to file taxes in all 50 states because we did business in all 50 states. It was a nightmare every single year. And as a CEO, every single year at tax time, I had to take spreadsheets with hundreds of thousands of lines of billing data. One system we had tracked everything by state. One thing we had tracked everything by zip code. It was just a nightmare. So I had to take all of that and then reconcile it with another spreadsheet that had state and zip code in it and try to put everything together. And what I would do every single year is I would open this up and I'd say, God, I wish I remember what I did last year to make this easier. And I never did. So every year I did the same thing. I Googled it. I went to YouTube. I watched videos. How in the world do I pull all of this data together? And it took hours and hours and hours for me to do every year. Yesterday, I was trying to do something similar with one spreadsheet. I had columns of data in column F and column G. And this is just yesterday. And I'm going, how do I find out what's missing in column F? And if it is, to put the data in column G in that column. That's all I want to do. So I just went to ChatGPT. Excel formula, if column F is blank, insert with data from column G. And it gave me the formula, and I put the formula in, done. Seconds. And that was just yesterday. That would have saved me so much time years ago. The other thing that's great for me, I had a leg up when I was running my company. I had something most people don't have. I had a wife that does communications professionally. So I would write things, and I write very similar to how I speak. So I would write things. Here's what I want to say in an email to clients or to a social media post or to a publication, whatever it is. And I'd go give it to her and I'd say, hey, can you please make it sound like a seventh grader didn't write this? And she'd take it and she'd polish it up and give it back to me. Now I don't give it to her. I just put it into ChatGPT and say, can this be improved upon? Turns out the answer is always yes. And it always gives me something that sounds better than what I wrote. And if I don't like it, I can ask and it'll help me rephrase it, which is phenomenal. Because not everybody has what I had when I was doing this with my wife in the background helping me out. That is a massive competitive advantage for small businesses. If you're not using it, you're missing a huge opportunity. Sales, promotions, email, social media, it's all there. The other thing that's really interesting about AI is it doesn't sleep. That's kind of silly to say, but you know who else doesn't sleep? Entrepreneurs. So I used to get up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and my mind was racing. There were so many things on my mind that when I got up, I could not go back to sleep. Going back to sleep was just never going to happen. And so I'd go downstairs and I'd work. And all the crazy thoughts and ideas that I had in my mind, imagine if I could just throw some of those things into an AI system to help me process some of those things. My wife is the opposite. In her business she's building now, she stays up late. So she won't come to bed till 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. Again, same thing. If she's got these thoughts, these ideas, they don't have to go to bed until the next morning when your staff member shows up. You can leverage this information. It's right there at your fingertips. Saves you a lot of time, saves you a ton of money. So some ideas, again, if you're going to build a business, leveraging chatbots on your website's a great tool. A lot of people do this. It's a great thing you can do. Brainstorm and automate social media posts. And the cool thing is a lot of these social media platforms, a lot of these online platforms have AI built right in. So again, it makes your life a little bit easier. You don't have to use separate tools. It's right there. If you're not using it, you're missing a massive opportunity to level up your game as a small business because you don't have the resources to go out and hire a whole team of comms and marketing people. You just can't do it as a small business. It just doesn't exist. So it won't replace you. It will help you do more with less. And of course, it's essential for people, small businesses that are budget conscious, right? You have to be, right? My wife says I'm cheap. No, I'm budget conscious is my way of thinking about it. So now let's talk about cost of success. I told you I built this business. I partnered with my uncle to build this business. This was in 2017, the very beginning of 2017. The middle of 2019, as I told you before, all those companies that told me no, my phone started ringing. They all started calling. Things started going really, really well for us in the summer of 2019. So well so that everything else started falling apart. So my uncle, who I had some informal agreements with in the business arrangement, didn't want to move forward with some of these informal arrangements and formalize them. So my first bit of advice for everybody in this room, because this gets brought up every once in a while when I talk, is what would you do different? Take the word informal out of everything I'm saying. Don't make anything informal. Put it in writing. Make it formal. Don't assume it's going to get fixed on the back end. Put it in writing. Make sure it's done the right way up front. So I had this dispute with my uncle. At the same time, I had an investor borrow us money so we could scale up and handle all these customers. He all of a sudden wanted something different. He wanted a different arrangement. I said no. I was dealing with those two. Then I wake up one morning in November to find out I'm being sued in federal court for patent infringement. And within a couple of months from there, my uncle and the investor filed their lawsuits. So in 2019, I go from finally realizing what I've been working so hard for. I was getting all the big contracts. I was getting the big business. I was getting everything I said was gonna happen, everything I wanted to happen, I worked so hard for, the beginning of 2020, I'm now facing 3 lawsuits. And I'm facing it all by myself because there was nobody there to help me. The momentum we had from a business perspective basically came to a screeching halt because now this was my primary focus, which leads to what I wrote the book about, the figure it out mindset. So if I ask this group, the words figure it out, if you think about a time you've used those words, what other words could you use in its place? What other things could you say when you hear that phrase used or you've used it?
Get it done.
Get it done? Anything else? The thing that comes to mind when I hear figure it out is not my problem. So if you think about a lot of times you hear somebody say, you figure it out, right? Mom and dad probably said that to you a lot. I say it to my kids all the time. You figure it out. That's a really nice way of saying, not my problem. And the figure it out mindset, as it's written on the screen, is not a checklist, it's a mindset. A lot of people want this to be a checklist. Tell me what to do, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, so I know what to do and I do it. It doesn't work that way. Because the figure it out mindset requires you to stop and recognize nobody else is going to solve this problem for you. It doesn't matter if you're qualified, doesn't matter if you want to, it doesn't matter if you can afford to. This problem has to be solved. For me, this was a pretty significant time, right? 3 major lawsuits while taking on thousands of customers at that same time, while also trying to scale up employees in the business so he could support it. Figure it out was pretty big. Small business or a startup, it might not be that drastic, right? Take the window washing business. Their job of figuring out, is there a real problem for the product you solved or you created, right? But nobody else is going to do it for you. That's the mindset. That's the power of the mindset. So what does this require? Again, we've talked before about this already. Radical honesty, okay? You can sit back and complain. You can make excuses. You can point the finger at anybody you want. Nothing is going to make a darn bit of difference till you do something about it. You have to be honest, okay? My son and I were leaving the gym yesterday, and this is where it's important to understand certain behaviors and certain things you might hear. We're leaving the gym yesterday. As we're getting in the car, my son says, hey, do you see that guy in the car next to us watching YouTube on his phone? His window's down, so my son could hear. He's like watching a movie. I said, yeah. And I said, here's the interesting part. He can go home and tell somebody he was at the gym for an hour, and he's not lying, right? He can lie to everybody he wants. Radical honesty is kind of the wake-up call that you can lie to anybody you want. You can't lie to the guy in the mirror. So at a certain point, you have to start being honest. Okay, you have to redefine success and learn to compartmentalize. One of the things that is not up there, but one of the things that's really, really important, and maybe it's in a different slide, but when I think about what it's like to be an entrepreneur, one of the questions or one of the things that I say all the time is it's like a dimmer switch on a wall. It's kind of a silly example, but let me explain to you what I mean. When you decide to start a business, right, your mind is so focused on this business, right? You're so excited. You have all that energy. It's like a light switch on the wall that's flipped on. You can't turn it off. And the dimmer switch is basically how focused on this am I at that particular point in time, right? Does that make sense? The farther you get down the road, the more you realize it's not a dimmer switch, it's a wall of dimmer switches. It's an entire wall of them. Because now I have to think about growing the business, I have to think about marketing, I have to think about sales, I have to think about accounting and legal and staffing and HR. All of a sudden you realize every one of those switches is always on. And the compartmentalization piece means I have to get really, really good at how I focus on one thing at a time. Otherwise, I'll get nothing done. So for me, I had to do that when it came to each lawsuit. I had 3 different lawsuits. I had different attorneys for each one of them. So I had to focus on one, and then, I had to go deal with the sales team. And I had to go back to the other one, then I had to go deal with the account manager team, then I had to deal with the legal team and the accounting. So you have to compartmentalize so you can do this, and redefining success changes all that. What does success look like? It's no longer, I want to build this multi-billion-dollar company. Success comes one task at a time. So now let's talk about the stuff you don't see. I'm just about done here. Don't do it alone. So here's the great thing about this, the sponsor for tonight's event, Launch Minnesota, right? It's this great organization of entrepreneurs and people that are coming together. The mistake that I made, and I can tell you this because I know it firsthand, is I did it alone. So when all of this happened to me, I shut everybody else out. I didn't want this problem to be somebody else's burden. So the professional network that I had built, all these different people that I've built relationships over all these years, I stopped communicating with them when I left them alone because I didn't want to burden them. So I thought, I'll take it all on myself. I'll figure this out. I'll work my way through it, and I won't bother these people. The interesting thing for me is I just got a text message just a couple of days ago from somebody that I've known for 15 years. And he said, I just read the book. I had no idea you were going through all that. And it's interesting to hear, but again, it's also kind of a reminder that, hey, dummy, there's people here that you actually could have been talking to throughout this entire process. People that you could have leaned on, people that could have helped you, people that could have just been a sounding board, right, for what I need. So identify the people in your network. And I've said this to everybody that I know that's building a business. I'm happy to be that guy for anybody that needs it. You get stuck, vent. Let's do it. Let's have these conversations. Let's talk about it. I've been through it. Don't do it on your own. As I say all the time, it takes a very special and stupid person to do it that way, right? And I can tell you, I was both. It's really, really, really hard. Okay? Use those relationships to find the people that you can lean on when you need it, so you can talk to, you can have these open dialogues, because doing it on your own is not worth it. I promise you. It's really, really hard. So my closing thoughts here, and I want to open up for questions. I say all this to you today not to scare you away from starting a business or building a business. I'm not a corporate person, right? I'm the wrong guy to go to a corporate world, badge in. Like, I'm just not wired that way. I couldn't do anything other than what I'm doing now. I'm building another business right now. I found a need 20 some years ago that's still never been solved. So now I'm going to solve it. Okay. So I share this with you not to scare you away from doing it, but to help you understand what you're coming up against when you decide to do it, right? To understand what that road's going to look like. It's not smooth. It's bumpy. It's crazy. It's messy. I promise you it is every single time. And the more prepared you are for it, the higher the likelihood of success. That's just the reality of it. Don't let fear stop you. And again, be prepared for the unexpected. The FIO mindset, the figure it out mindset, not my problem, doesn't apply. And that's the way you have to think about it. Not my problem does not apply. And when that's the case, when there's no other option other than actually solving the problem one way or another. So I tell people all the time, I became a law student when I hit my lawsuits. I just studied the law like my life depended on it. Because guess what? It did. And I woke up every morning and just studied the law. There was nothing that happened that I wasn't prepared for. Nothing. And the last thing I'll say real quick, and I'll open up for questions, because I think it's important to tell you how it all ended, right? Tell you the fun about starting it, the scary part about when I was doing it and how it all ended. I was victorious in all three of the lawsuits. So the investor and my uncle, never went to trial. Cost me a lot of money. Neither one of them got what they wanted. And the last one, the patent lawsuit, went to trial in federal court. I sat on trial for 8 days. About 10 hours I sat on the witness stand. And at the end of it, jury came back, which is a surreal moment when a jury is determining your fate. And the jury said, no, they don't infringe on your patents. And in fact, our counterclaims to them were the patents never should have been issued, and the jury agreed to that. So after all of that, the company continued to grow during all this craziness. I mean, in a way that it's hard to even explain. That happened in May of 23, and in September of 23, I finally said, you know what? I'm tired. And I sold the company, which has led me to where I am now. I wrote this book to share my story and tell about what I've been through, but also now I get to do stuff like this and share with other people, again, what I went through and how you can get through it, because you can, I promise you. So I'm going to stop there for now, and I want to answer any questions you have. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you've talked a little bit about how, being your boss does also mean that you have to work very difficult hours. There's a lot being done. It all does fall on you. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you built the discipline to be able to deal with that and how you still kept dealing with that during these difficult times.
I mean, it's a great question. I don't know that I can tell you the exact answer, right? So I grew up an Army brat. So Gary and I were talking about this before you guys came here. So I was all over the world as a kid. I went to 12 different schools before I graduated high school. And so I was used to change. I was used to forced change, right? And so I got really used to things not going as planned. And again, excuses don't solve problems, right? So like I wrote in the book, we moved from Alaska to Texas to Panama. And I didn't bring a parka to Panama, right? Like I had to change because of where I was now. And so for me, that's sort of the simple way for me to say the mindset for me is I'm used to change. I'm used to the disruption and I just evolve and figure it out, right? Because there's no alternative, right? The alternative, nobody cares, right? So nobody else was going to do it for me, right? When I set out to build the business, nobody else was going to wake up early. Nobody else was going to figure out the sales side. Nobody else was going to build it for me. I had to do it all myself. Yeah.
How do you approach goal setting when you have these visions of creating a business, and how do you translate that goal into actionable daily steps that actually lead you to the goal?
Yeah, great question. So my answer is going to be not only in business, but in life, right? To me, one of the biggest, so let me explain it to you this way. When the lawsuits hit, right? The insane goal I could have set for myself was I'm going to win all of them and sell my company. I mean, just think of how massive that goal is, right? The goal for me, the way people I think need to approach goal setting is a goal is not an output, it's an input. Okay, too many people focus on the goal as the end result is the output, right? Which is why so many people fail to reach New Year's resolutions. They set them and they give up on them in a week, right? Or I heard one the other day, this guy said he was going to read 24 books in 2025. And he is currently halfway through book 1. Right? So what's he going to do? Is he now going to read 24 and a half books in 7 months or 8 months? No. Right? So it's not, I'm going to read 24 books. It's, I'm going to read 25 pages a night. Right? It's the input. So for me, everything came down to the input, not the output. It's too big to think about the output. So my goal today is to get slightly better than I was yesterday. So if I made phone calls yesterday and I got told no, what did I get told no for? And my goal today is make sure that if I get a no, it's not for the same reason as yesterday. And for me, that was the thing that was really great for me was for a lot of people, a no is crushing. For entrepreneurs, people that come out of college, like I went to the financial services industry trying to be an advisor. You know how many times you get told no as a 24-year-old financial advisor? Like all the time, right? That's just the way it is. If you let the no crush you, you'll never move forward. So to me, every time somebody said no in the business, I needed to understand why they said no. And I had to make sure that I never received no for the same reason again. So whatever it was, I had to learn from it. As painful or as much as I disagreed with it, it didn't matter. I had to understand what it was so I didn't make the same mistake. So the goal, to answer your question, the goal is an input. What is that I have to do today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day that's going to get me to where I'm trying to go? If you focus too much here, you just end up shooting yourself in the foot because again, you find out you're 5 months through the year and you've read half a book, right? It's overwhelming and it's daunting. Yeah.
Talked a little bit about the trust that larger companies had with you originally when you started, and then kind of some of the advantages you saw being a small business. How did you approach some of those trust issues and prove that you could handle those larger scale clients?
Yeah. Well, again, so when I started and I would reach out to these large companies, again, they were generally very polite when they told me to go away, right? And that's basically what they did. Some of them said, we had one company that said, we're going to build our own. We got so much money, we don't need yours. We're just going to build our own. Thanks for bringing it to our attention that this is a problem. We're just going to build one. So what I did every time they said no or went to a competitor, we're going to build our own, I stayed in touch with them very intentionally. I gave them updates as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. When I saw a fine come through, $1 million fines were coming from the regulators for texting, I'd shoot them a message and say, hey, did you see this? I found every reason I could to professionally stay in touch with these people and drip communication on them so they understood that we were constantly making progress. So if they didn't like the fact that we're small, every time a small to medium-sized company would launch us, we'd push them to put out a press release and I'd share the press release so they see their peers are using us, right? So it was a lot of staying in contact with these people. I didn't do it systematically, right? So one of the things that I made a very strong point of is I didn't send a note out like on the 1st of every month because they see that coming, right? You get spam emails, newsletters on the 1st of every month. So I'd send them on random days. I'd send them on weekends because I know some of these executives are working on weekends. They might open the email. They may not respond, but they see it. And that's honestly how we rebuilt the trust and built that foundation that we're not going away. We're here and the product continues to evolve. But yeah, I mean, we had one customer say, hey, if we add 15,000 people, can you guys really handle 15,000 people? And I'm on the phone with the executive and I went, of course we can. And I hang up and go, oh my God, what are we going to do? Right? But we'll figure it out. That was it. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about how talent recruitment is very important for what you do. I'm curious if there's like specific traits you're looking for in recent grads or what opportunities can be available to people like us.
Yeah. So, yes, there's plenty of opportunities to recent grads, right? Whether or not the person or the position you're going to want can see it properly is always the challenge, right? When you are a recent grad and you start applying to a bunch of jobs, you got to know you're one of 500 that's doing it, right? And so to find a way to make the connection is really important. So if you want to work in the corporate world and I really want to work at, I'll use Target as an example. Do I know anybody that's at Target? Is there anybody that I can talk to that might help me get my foot in the door to the hiring manager or that's in the position that I might want? Is that even a thing? Can I find that person? For me, I was doing the outreach when I was recruiting. So I was looking for very specific traits. Okay, so I wanted, like with my salespeople, I wanted people that were athletes. I wanted people that I know had to go through some challenging times because mentally, that's kind of what you go through in a sales role. And when you're selling to financial advisors, they can be difficult to deal with sometimes, right? So I was trying to find people that I felt, at least on the surface, had some of those qualities. When I was looking for support people, again, I was looking for very specific qualities of somebody who's in a position where they have to interact with people on a regular basis. Doesn't mean they all were interested, doesn't mean they were perfect, but those were some of the traits I was looking for. So for me, I was doing all the outreach, trying to find these people. If I'm on the other side, don't wait till you're looking for a job to network. That's silly, that's crazy, right? The thing you gotta understand, especially about a lot of the corporate positions, half the time the job's filled when it's posted, but they have to post it for legal reasons. So you have to go find these people. You have to network with these people. Don't be afraid to do that. And again, if you do it right, you do it professionally. Most people are open to a cup of coffee and that's all you're looking for. Yeah.
How did you find investors or financing?
Oh man, that is really, really hard. So when I started a tech company, we started with nothing. Okay. There was a group of advisors that I knew that I presented this idea to that I would love. We were looking for an investor to help us build this. And these 4 advisors invested in me, right? They knew me. They knew nothing. The product didn't even exist, right? So they gave us a small amount of money up front, knowing that, we might never see this money again, right? But collectively, we had a decent amount to start. After that, we were never able to raise capital again. We found this guy that I filed a lawsuit, or we had a lawsuit against, who had borrowed us money, which was interesting to find him through a connection. And it's a really difficult thing to do, to be honest with you, to find it. It's just a lot of networking, a lot of asking a lot of questions, find the right people, find the right partner. That was what was really important to me. The first group we had were partners. This guy changed on a dime, which was really unfortunate. But you got to find the right person. So initially we had a guy that was in the 4 who became very difficult to deal with. He wanted to know, what's my rate of return going to be? How soon am I going to get it? And it's a startup, right? I'm like, I have no idea, right? Clearly that wasn't going to be the right partner for what we were trying to be. So we kicked him out. The money is not worth that kind of headache. So trying to find the right people as you're doing it is difficult. You're gonna have a lot of conversations. You're gonna see a lot of optimism. You're gonna see some people that are gonna want to take advantage of you. And that's why it's important to start those conversations long before you need the money. Because when you're desperate, you do silly things.
Kind of like a two-part question. So you talked a little bit about you saw this big problem and talking to coworkers and your own employer and other employers, you saw this huge, and everyone was also seeing this problem. And it sounded like as you kind of created the product, there was a lot of optimism around it. How did you turn that optimism into sales? I've just seen it a lot with a lot of businesses or even professors or other business professionals, is they're very willing to tell you it's a great idea until it comes to the point of helping or purchasing or doing something like that. And then that enthusiasm drops off at a drastic rate.
Yeah.
So how do you turn those, oh, this is an amazing idea, or I love this product, into, well, I haven't seen you buy anything yet, or I haven't seen you offer any advice to propel?
Yeah, so it's a simple question, but a really complicated answer, and more so than I could probably even go into today. But here's what I'll tell you on the first question with how do you get people excited to buy, right? One of the biggest mistakes I see people making all the time when they're selling a product or selling something, especially as a startup, is they spend way too much time selling the solution. Here's what I've created, here's why you need it. When I created this, I sold the problem. Everything I sold was the problem, right? So take the window washers. The solution is washing windows. The problem is dirty windows, right? And so everything comes down to what you're trying to explain to somebody, what you're trying to get them to buy. For me, everything was the problem. Here's the problem. And the problem is it's being done illegally. My clients text me all the time. It's being done out of compliance. You're gonna get caught. You're going to get fined. It's going to be a lot of money and it's going to be a big problem. So it was the problem. I needed them to recognize the problem was big enough for them to say, okay, you're right, it is a problem. What's the solution? And I was there with the solution. So for me, initially, the market didn't exist for this. We had to create the market by really drawing attention to the problem itself. So if all I did was sell the solution, everybody was gonna be like, well, we don't even see the problem's that big, so why do we care? Why are we gonna spend money on this solution? The problem has to be real, which is why I said that's step one. The problem has to actually be real. So that's the hardest thing, is understanding how you actually sell the problem, not just the solution. And the other thing is, be very careful when you think other people are gonna match your enthusiasm. They won't. That's just the reality of it. You're gonna have that enthusiasm. You're gonna be so jacked up. Some people are gonna be excited for you, but they're never gonna match that enthusiasm. So don't think poorly on them because they don't. Just know it's gonna happen. They got their own lives. They got their own things. That's just not the way it is. Yeah.
So how would you go about, like, let's say a company is using a product that solves the problem partially, maybe legally, so they're not liable, but the product you're selling is higher quality and comparable price and solves the problem like 100%.
Yeah.
How would you go about switching from the problem or like the product that they're already using to what you have to offer?
Yeah. Simple answers, your questions, not your answers. So it's all in your questions, not your statements. So I could believe my product is the greatest thing in the world. Again, I can't tell somebody that and expect them to believe it. I see this all the time, especially with financial advisors, right? When I meet with them and work with them, it's like I'm pointing out to the client all the things they need to do. And I'm like, yeah, guess who hates that? The client. They hate being told they're wrong. They hate being told they're doing it wrong. But if you ask really good questions and you guide the conversation, they will walk right down the road that you want them to walk. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? What are the strengths? How does it work? How's the support? Tell me about the cost. You start asking all these questions. For me, I knew just as much about my competition than I knew of my own product. So I knew their weaknesses. So I knew exactly what to ask along the way because I knew exactly where the conversation was going. And when they pointed out the weakness was, hey, we want to spin up 100 counts and it takes 2 weeks to get it back. How long would it take you? And I used to joke all the time. I'm like, well, I mean, if I go fill up my coffee, probably 30 seconds. And the people would laugh because they think I was being sarcastic and trying to be funny. And I'm like, I'm not kidding. It's that fast. Because I knew the problem already. So what I would tell you to do is really focus your time on the questions you ask, not so much on what you're trying to sell or your statements.
We've got one more, time for one more quick question from Ray up front here.
Something that interested me was your background in the financial services industry.
Yeah.
It's sort of my background and I'm gonna be a financial advisor out of college, so what's your biggest like tips for someone who's getting into that industry out of college?
It's a lot of work, right? When you get into this industry, it takes a long time to build a book of business that is sustainable, right? And a lot of people come into this business thinking it's gonna be quick, thinking they're gonna make it, it's gonna be successful. It takes a long time. And so it's one of those things where you have to understand how long that takes and be comfortable with it. So somebody said to me when I started my business, don't expect to pay yourself for 7 years. Now, that was my tech company. I actually didn't pay myself for 5. Okay. Now, when you start off, obviously you need that income, but my advice is work really hard, get really honest, understand who your clientele is, understand who you work with, how you work with them, how you help people. Be relentless in sharing that so people understand that professionally, and just understand it takes time, right? Because a lot of consumers today, to me, being a financial advisor is one of the greatest things in the world. I absolutely loved doing it. I still love being affiliated with that business today. But a lot of people look to a young advisor and they're like, I'll wait, let me wait a little bit to see if you're still here, because I don't want to do this over and over and over again. So just to understand it's a war of attrition. And if you can hold out and keep your integrity and continue to share your story, you can do really well in it. Yeah.
Let's give it up for Derrick. Reflecting in between covers of his book, Put to the Test, this issue of resilience and basically how to figure it out. For a lot more of what he's been talking about, his book is a great read. It's on Barnes & Noble and Amazon and available everywhere. I just want to thank you, Derrick. I want to thank our online audience. I want to thank our in-gateway audience. And hopefully we'll do this again, and go Mavs. Thank you very much, everybody. Fun. That's the official part. And I'm